Let's talk about mistakes. You know, I think that there's this idea that you got to be perfect in the studio, but you think about doctors. What do they say? Well, what do doctors do? They practice medicine. Tattoo artists, they got to practice on somebody. There's some bad tattoos out there.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the...
No regrets, man.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me about some of the mistakes that you remember making, and we don't have to name, you know, because I don't want anyone coming back and saying, I want my money back.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've all made mistakes on records because we're all learning. We're constantly, hopefully, in a state of, you know, we're always evolving in terms of our skills and learning new things. And I mean, I pick up tape op and, you know, I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea, or that's a cool, you know, and everybody does something a little different, and there's a little bit of,
There's always room for error in the recording studio.
Yeah. So can you remember any?
Here's a classic. I don't know how many times I've panned the overhead mics to the center to check their phase, and then forgot to pan them back out left and right, and printed the final mix.
Well, we talked about mono drums
over and over, man, and it's like I'll be like, oh shit, oh no. And then I'm like, everyone's in the room. They all think it sounds great. It sounded good to me. I didn't notice. Like, okay, great. I've done that so many times. I don't even want to think about it, you know? The other one was, we were talking about the other day, the thing I wrote about Quasi, and that back in the early first year of the studio, I didn't understand drum phase polarity.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm sending all these albums out, and there were a lot of records getting made that first year at Jackpot. And finally, John Golden at Golden Mastering calls me up and goes, hey, you know, the snare's out of phase with the overheads. And I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't know that was even a thing. No one taught me that, obviously, because I didn't go to school or intern anywhere.
Right.
So, you know, he told me how to, you know, make some, because I had a Mackie board which didn't have any polarity buttons on it, so I couldn't check phase with that. So I made cables that were XLR reversal cables, and I could plug them in and double check. It was tedious, but I figured out what was going on.
Right.
And the next thing I know, just boom, the drum sounded better, because now the snare sound wasn't getting kind of like canceled out by the overhead sound or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a big mistake, and that was like, wow, I started becoming far more attuned to polarity issues.
Right.
And phase cancellation stuff after that.
Yeah.
Oh, in my basement studio, I remember leaning over. There's a window. The control room window was like this big, right? And I'm like leaning over to look at one of the musicians in the other room, and my shoulder touched the flange of the tape deck. So that's gonna go like when you play it back, it's gonna go like the pitch is gonna go up and drop.
Right.
Back. And it did a little bit, but it wasn't that overt. But one of the bass players like, what? And I'm like, oh shit! It did change the music. It did mess up. So there was that. We had a tape deck. The first tape deck at Jackpot was an MCI JH16 16 track, and when we first got it, there's the box where you arm all the tracks, or you put them in record or cell sync or whatever, or repro, and so it was. But a bunch of the record buttons didn't have lights inside of them yet because we hadn't got it all fixed. And channel 1 was usually what? Kick drum. And guess what channel during the overdubs was in record?
Oh, shit.
On something just recorded, everything's struck, the band's gone, they come back in, and we'd just been doing something else. I think I was calibrating the tape deck or something. But I couldn't see that the record switch was on because there's no light in it. It was like, oh my God. So I recorded over the kick drum and then tried to figure out what to do to that, to replace it. We tried sampling it with something that was totally stupid. And oh my God. Yeah, so I feel like I still make some mistakes, but they're usually really minor. Like I've trained myself not to let the really dumb stuff happen anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's the technical stuff, and then there's also the you know, personal interaction stuff. You know, dealing with people and not, you know, maybe not having your empathy in check, and not, you know, I mean, you know, we all get tired, we all get, you know, and I've definitely made some made some mistakes in that regard, and in terms of just maybe saying the wrong thing or pushing too hard on somebody, or pushing them over the brink, or trying to push somebody into an emotional space so that I was going to get the performance that I thought I was going to get out of them, or whatever it was. And I think my approach as I've gotten older is just do less and try to do no harm. And I found like the less you sort of, and of course early on just, over EQing things or over compressing things, or just, being too heavy-handed with things.
Thinking that you're making something cool.
Making it cool, but you're really just kind of squeezing the life out of things. Or
whenever there's been a flavor of the year kind of thing, like Nigel Godrich's production on Radiohead's OK Computer was kind of a landmark for music at that point, of just sort of a different way to produce a record. Different over-compressed drum sounds, or the Strokes with the distorted vocal. Right. So someone would come in, I go, when are they going to ask for the distorted vocal? I can just tell. Yep, here it comes. Yep. When are they going to ask for the over-compressed drums? Oh, here it comes.
Right.
And I've always kind of resented that, because I'm like, that just sounds like a patina you're painting over something is bullshit, So to me, that was always like, that's kind of a mistake from the artist's part, to think that they can just do this without coming in with that being a whole part of of their thing already. Like, I found a great way to get a distorted vocal. Can we track this? Sure, that sounds cool. Let's try it. Instead of just asking me for these things to come magically out of the air that might not even apply to the music they're doing.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting backwards version of it, for me. I used to get really annoyed. There's less of that now than there has been, but it's also easier just to do something really quick with a plug-in. It goes, "That make you happy?" And back in the day, there's just less things to use. You're like, "What do I do? What do I run it through?"
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
There's a song called "Bachelor and the Bride" by the Decemberists on the O Majesty record, and the thing that killed me on that was just I in the bridge, there's a breakdown, and then the bass carries it for a second. And I just wish I'd asked the bass player to just like dig in more and give a different tone, but I just was kind of going with whatever was happening. And when I mixed that, I could not get it to do what I wanted at all. So that really made me more conscious of what kind of sound am I getting on the bass for some people. Because I used to think that people all came in with their own tones and stuff all set up and really had their stuff. I wouldn't touch guitar amp settings and stuff. And I soon realized that I was delusional.
Yeah.
Most people haven't done any of that work, and they don't really have it. It's not really as under their control as I assumed it should be or would be. So that was something like that. And he was really kind of sort of a temporary fill-in bass player. I've since worked with him, and I said something once, and he goes, "I wish you'd told me." And I said, "I wish I'd known." Not your fault. Like, I just didn't hear it that way till I was trying to make it really work, and there was something weird about it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of the way, I almost even went and played. I don't think I had enough tracks, but I was thinking of even just putting a bass for that spot, play it myself. But it would have been hard. There was no click track or, it was one of those things in the moment. Had to be right.
Any mistakes that you've made that were amazing and ended up being like, great additions to the production?
I'm sure there are. It's weird.
I guess they were no longer considered mistakes, just
now they're genius. Now I'm just a genius. I'm sure there's funny little things, for sure. And I'm sure there's artists that can tell you. And sometimes it's really hard to remember all those things. I don't feel like I try to take credit for most of it either.
Yeah. Well, there's those happy accidents that happen, just things that just happen to happen, like a room mic gets moved and it just happens to be like the coolest thing or whatever,
Or like, when you start tape and record, like say you got a synthesizer playing, you start so it does like that, like that laser sound or something, Star Wars laser. And so I remember like, just accidentally being like, oh wow, listen to that, and using that on some Quasi records for sure. Like the just weird little sounds are happening through the track or in the part of the track, So, sometimes just the mechanics of recording would create a happy accident for sure, especially on tape, because just weird little things would happen.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
Like, let's utilize it. But it feels like there's less randomness these days. So maybe that's the mistake.